Hello and welcome to Spooky Stitches, the knitting podcast that is 50% wool and 50% creep factor. My name is Sheena Perrell. I am a knitting novelist from the Pacific Northwest. I'm a crafter, knitwear designer, and author of 10 books, which you can find linked down below. You can find out more about everything that I do, as well as timestamps to all the different chapters down in the description box. And if you like what you see, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, as it really helps the channel gain visibility. So it's been about 3 weeks since my last podcast. I'm trying to maintain a regular schedule with the new job that I'm doing, but my new temp placement has really been kicking my butt. And in addition to that, I've had some brain weasels the last couple of weeks. Just my mental health has not been in the best place. One of the reasons why the last podcast was basically audio only was just I was mentally not able to edit. When my mental health is low, I get body dysmorphia and I can't look at images of myself. So I just wanted to delete everything, and when my mental health gets bad, I get a body dysmorphia and I can't look at pictures of myself. I can't look at work that I've done. I just want to delete everything. So that's really not a good time to edit, because I will literally take an entire first draft and put it in the trash. So I was avoiding that. And just decided to experiment instead with audio only, because my creative process is very much word-based. So speaking is harder for me than writing. That's one of the reasons why I started a podcast, so I could work on improving that skill. But it's still hard, and I just was not in a place to do a podcast last week. But the new job is getting better. It pays a lot better, so that's a good thing. We should be a lot more stable going forward. And I actually have 2 new releases to tell you about. So the first one is the NaNoWriMo workbook. This is the companion piece to the author workbook that I did a couple of months ago. This is going to be up in my Gumroad shop only. It is a PDF download, and you can get it for $1.99. And it is a workbook with printable worksheets to help you plot out your NaNoWriMo novel, and just to make the most of your 50,000 words, and to help you get closer to meeting your goal, whatever that is, for November. So that's out May 30th, and it's in the Gumroad shop. It will be going up for pre-order here shortly. I just need to finish up a couple of things on it. And then the second pre-order is the second H.A. Marshall book. That is going out on July 5th. Again, there will be a pre-order, but it's not ready yet. And that'll be available on Amazon as a Kindle download, or all ebook formats are available in my Gumroad shop. I usually do Kindle EPUB and PDF, but if you are someone who uses a Kobo or a Nook or something and you need a different format, you can always just message me and I can create another file for you. So that's going up July 5th. Now, I can't tell you the title of it just yet because my patrons are voting on the title right now. And actually, I opened up the title vote to everybody. So I'll leave a link down below, and you can head over there and let me know what you think the title of AJ's second book should be. So it is continuing the mystery of the first book, as AJ and Jasper track down a human trafficking ring. It's a bit darker than the first episode, or than the first novel. So I was originally calling it Magic in the Jazz Age, but I don't like that title for it. To me, saying Magic in the Jazz Age implies glitz and glamour and, you know, speakeasies and sequins and dancing and all of that stuff. And originally that was where I was going to put this book, but that's not where it ended up going. So I'm looking for a new title for it. And if I could go back in time, I think I would actually swap the titles. So the first book is Magic in the Jazz Age and the second book is Magic in the Headlines. But, you know, we don't have time machines. So just help me vote on that title at the link down below, and you'll be able to get that book July 5th. It will be up for pre-order, and there will be discounts available for patrons. So let's start off with some finished objects. I just have the one this week. My knitting mojo has also been really low, so I have the finished editor socks. This is the Hermione's Everyday Sock pattern from Ravelry, which is one of my all-time favorite sock patterns. It's the basis of my own vanilla sock pattern, and the yarn that I used is Knitpicks Stroll in the colorway Cordial, and she is going to love these. These colors are right up her alley. I almost kept them for myself, but I decided that they needed to be hers, so these will be getting shipped off as soon as I finish the second pair of socks for her, which I'll be casting on in a little while, but I needed a break and to knit something for myself. When I knit a lot of things for other people, I'm just like, no, I need to be selfish for a little while. So I am working on 3 different projects right now. So the first project is one that you guys saw last week, which is the crocheted zigzag Afghan. And I realized that I hadn't included very good pictures of it last week. So I went through and just filmed it a little bit better. It's about twice as long as it was last time. And in this shot, it's actually folded over just so I can get the whole thing in frame. It is wide enough for a full-size bed, and the colors that I used are the teal is Joann Fabric's Big Twist, which is 100% acrylic, and then the other 2 yarns are also 100% acrylic. They're Knitpicks Brava in, what was that seafoam color? I don't remember it, like a seafoam green and then black. So that is coming along really well. I'm just working on a couple stripes here or there while we watch TV in the evening, and it's been really satisfying to work on. I'm crocheting over my ends as I go, so there won't be any to weave in, and that is so nice. I love being able to work over my ends when I'm knitting and crocheting because I hate weaving them in. The only thing worse is doing seaming. So that's been very fun to work on. The other thing that I'm working on is a sweater for my friend Becca. She requested a cardigan with a hood and pockets in the colors of the bisexual pride flag, and I started on it and I don't like it. So I'm going to be ripping out this panel here that I had started on, and I'm going to work on it in a slightly smaller gauge. I originally cast on in an 8 because that's what the pattern recommended, but I'm not quite following the pattern, so I'm going to have to go down 2 needle sizes to a US 6. And I don't want to say the pattern here because I'm not following it exactly. I wanted to cast it on when I was super broke, so I just kind of looked at the picture, and I can reverse engineer most patterns by looking at the pictures. So I'm just casting on from the top of the hood and then working my way down. And the way it's set up is, picture like a really long scarf that is draped over your head and then hangs down the front. And that's the front part of the sweater, and then you pick up stitches at the back of the neck and work downward, and you join under the arms, and then the rest of it's knit in the round, or I guess it's knit flat because it's a cardigan, but you know, front and back knit together. So I'm gonna be restarting that. That's what I was just unraveling here. And then the other project I'm working on actively is an Argyle sweater vest. And that's another one where I'm just reverse engineering it from a pattern on Ravelry. I'm using Knitpicks Stroll Tweed in Atlantis. And as much as I love Knitpicks Stroll, I'm not super crazy about the tweed. The little tweedy bits just fall off, and they're very much an afterthought. So it feels kind of like you're knitting with yarn that has just been like left out and got covered in lint, which in my house, the yarn does get covered in lint and cat hair because we have 4 cats and a 5th that's currently staying with us. So it's just not that pleasurable to knit with. I really like the color. I knew as soon as I saw this pattern that this was the yarn I wanted to use. So I'm hoping that it improves as I'm knitting with it. Like maybe I just got a ball that's not that great. I don't think that's the case, but I can hope. So that is the Argyle sweater. Those are the ones that I'm working on right now. So those are the projects I'm working on right now, and I'm trying to get my knitting mojo back a little bit. My old job, I was able to knit while I was working. That's not a thing that can happen at my current job. So I'm just trying to like find a new balance. I'm still pretty exhausted when I come home because it's working 5 days a week. It's a much more stressful position than I was dealing with before. So anyway, enough about that. Okay, so for our sponsorship moment this week, I just wanted to give a shout out to all of my Patreons. I don't have very many right now. My goal is to get at least 3 more by the end of June. So if you are so inclined to please check that out, I will leave a link down below. But thank you so much to Jean H, Sharon G, Juanita A, Liana H, Jane Ann M, Sarah I, and Brittany C. I didn't want to say your whole names on the internet, so that's why I'm just using initials. But I did just want to say thank you. Most of my patrons have been with me for a really long time, like at least a year, if not more. So it really means a lot to me that you have stuck around and you're continuing to support me, even though I know I've had some rough patches and I don't always post the most frequently just because I don't always have time to. I have to put my day job first. So thank you so much for everything. Your patronage is really what keeps me going, not necessarily in a monetary way, but just knowing that there are people out there who value my work and who want to see more of it. And that really means the world to me. So thank you so much for coming along with me on this journey. If you would like to become a patron, membership starts at just $3 a month, and you can sign up at the link down below. So as far as what I've been watching and reading the last couple of weeks, my reading mojo has been pretty low, but I've been listening to a lot of stuff while I'm working. I am allowed to have headphones on, thank goodness. So I listen to podcasts and music and audiobooks, and that really gets me through the day. So recently, as far as what I've been watching, I saw The Mummy again for like the millionth time. This is my favorite B movie ever. And actually on one of our last thrifting adventures, I found a linen suit for $10 that needs a couple little alterations, but it is going to be a fantastic Evie cosplay at some point. and I am so thrilled with it. So I haven't gotten around to it yet. I will eventually. I might do a video on it, I don't know. But that's one that I'm really looking forward to working on once I get some time. I've also been rewatching Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries for the millionth time. That is one of my number one comfort watches. So it's something that I've really been needing the last couple of weeks, is a little bit of encouragement from Franny Fisher. I really love watching that mystery series. If you have not seen it, you definitely need to. It's available on DVD, which is how I've been watching it. But I think it's also still on Netflix, and it's also on Acorn TV. Not sponsored, wish it was. So Ash and I have also been watching Moon Knight on Disney Plus. I'm on the fence about this one. I'm not crazy about the portrayal of Egyptian mythology in this one. I'm not super crazy about the characters. I'm mostly just watching it because Ash is. But if you're a Marvel fan who likes Egyptian mythology, you might enjoy it. It's just apparently that is not me. There have been some funny moments in the most recent 2 episodes that have made it a little bit more worthwhile for me, but it's really just background noise at this point, but I will let you know if it improves. Also in background noise territory, don't hate me, it's The Witcher. I'm trying really hard to get through the first season because I've heard so many good things about it, and I will watch just about anything with Henry Cavill in it, but I'm just not enjoying it that much. I just finished up episode 3 today, and from what Ash told me, episode 4 is where it really starts to get interesting. So I'm hoping that I'm kind of over that hump now and it will get better. And then we also watched Spider-Man No Way Home last night. It was the first time I had seen it. We picked it up on DVD at Target. It was on sale. I have not been following the Spider-Man franchise. It's one of those where it's been remade so many times that I just don't care anymore. But I did really like this take on it, and I liked seeing the other Spider-Mans show up. That was a lot of fun. So it was enjoyable. I ended up crying through like the last 20 minutes, even though I'm not super attached to those characters, but I'm a crier. I will cry at the drop of a hat. Anyone will tell you this. So I did enjoy that. That one I thought was better than Moon Knight and The Witcher, at least. But it's not going on the special shelf where things like The Mummy and Franny Fisher go, because those are special movies in my heart, and no matter their flaws, I will love them anyway. And then as to what I'm reading, I just finished listening to Valiant Ambition, which is a book about Benedict Arnold and his betrayal of the American army during the American Revolution. I don't want to talk about that one too much, just because talking about the American Revolution makes me angry for reasons that I don't want to get into. Don't send me hate mail. But my unpopular opinion is that the American Revolution was handled poorly and was started by rich men, and they forced poor guys to fight it for them. And while the rest of the country was having an economic boom, the soldiers fighting for them were literally starving and walking around barefoot in the snow. So the American Revolution pisses me off. I hate it. So I did listen to it. It was a really good read. I think that it was a very important read. It was kind of like a hidden history type of thing, which I thought was really interesting. And there's just a lot of like really not likable characters at the beginning of America, and that trend continues. So, America. Great. The other thing that I started reading was Well Met by Jen DeLuca. I'm only like 10 pages in, so I know very little about what's happening, but basically the main character gets roped into working at a Renaissance fair because her niece is signing up, and I am just like so down for that. I haven't gotten very far into it though, and I picked that one up because the book I was reading before, which was a biography of the Fox sisters, I'm pretty sure I left it at the doctor's office when I was getting my drug test done for this new job. So yeah, that was an out of print book that I'm going to have to hunt down online again. But anyway, that's it for what I've been watching and reading. Really nothing groundbreaking there. So why don't we just move on to voiceover Sheena and get into the story for this week. This week we have a fictional story that is the follow-up to the history moment we had last week. This is a short that I wrote called The Watcher. It's a patrons only short story, so if you are not a patron, this is the only way that you can hear it or read it is through this podcast. If you are a patron, this is one of the stories that will be included in my short story collection once we hit the first patron goal on Patreon. So I am just going to shut up now and let voiceover Sheena take over.
Turn down the lights and pull up a cozy chair. It's time for this week's spooky tale, an original short by yours truly. We're continuing last week's Vampire Panic with The Watcher. Dusk was already falling when Mrs. Simpson arrived at the house on Porter Street, but that was January in Connecticut. Darkness crept in early like a train attached to her morning weeds and seemed to follow her through the streets. She knocked briskly and waited, still as a statue, until the door opened, revealing a thin, exhausted woman in calico, wrapped up in a shawl with a babe in her arms and two more clinging to her skirts. "You must be Mrs. Simpson." "Mrs. Brooks?" She nodded. "Thank you so much for coming." "No trouble at all, dear. I can certainly see why the agency sent me over straight away." The old widow bent to greet the children with a gentle smile, but they hid from her pale, wrinkled face behind their mother. "She's right this way. They said you can stay through the night?" "Dusk to dawn, those are my hours, and 3 nights after the death. I assume someone from the family will be with her during the day?" "Yes, we can have someone during the day. It's just—" Mrs. Simpson patted her client's arm soothingly. "We all need sleep, dearie. Don't feel guilty. You've got your hands full already, and I can't imagine that 3 little ones allow for much rest for the patient either. You must take care of yourself, or you're no good to anyone." "No, not at all." The woman looked ready to weep with relief. The duties of a woman were never done. Cooking, cleaning, child-rearing, laundry, and to add nursing on top of it. "Now, what can you tell me about the patient?" Mrs. Simpson asked as her employer led her to a tiny parlor. The young mother shooed her older children off to their room and sat down on the threadbare sofa, gesturing for her guest to take the seat across from her. "My sister, Delia Black. She came to live with us after little Robbie was born, but fell sick almost immediately. As though responding to his name, the babe in her arms cooed, and she moved him to the other shoulder." "Consumption?" Mrs. Brooks nodded. "It came so suddenly. A month ago she was playing with the children in the yard, and now she'll leave us any day." Mrs. Brooks turned her face away, dabbing at her eyes. "I see. It happens that way sometimes. Have no fear. No matter what happens, she won't be alone. I promise you that. I'll sit with her through the night, administer any medicines the doctors left, and make sure she eats and drinks as much as possible. And of course, notify you if there are any changes. Some patients have been known to make miraculous recoveries. I've seen it myself many times. The young woman shook her head, forcing down a surge of emotion. I'll show you to her room. Would you like tea or coffee? Tea, please, with a little milk if you have any. They arrived at the partially open door. Inside could be heard the labored breathing of the consumptive. Delia, darling, the watcher has arrived. This is Mrs. Simpson. The two of them and the baby crowded into the room, which was just a little bigger than the bed where the invalid lay. Hollow eyes cracked open, and she looked up at them from a skeletal face with sunken cheeks. Against the white counterpane and sheets, all that stood out was her dark hair fanned out on the pillow. I'll get you some tea, Mrs. Brooks said, vanishing into the shadows of the hall. Mrs. Simpson helped herself to a rocking chair by the bed, leaning down to give her charge another of her gentle smiles. Miss Black, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. The woman on the bed wheezed. You're here to watch me die. It was a statement of fact. Watchers were hired to stay with the dead and dying, so they might not be alone in their final moments on Earth. Still, Mrs. Simpson's eyes softened, and she took the thin hand lying limp on the bed covers. I'm here so you won't be alone, come what may. I'm here to guard your spirit and protect your body. The woman closed her eyes and drew her hand back, seeming to settle into a light sleep as though that one movement was all she had energy for. Mrs. Brooks returned, holding a tea tray, but not the baby. She set the tray down on the bedside table. I'll light a lamp for you, shall I? This room gets so dark in the afternoon. Don't trouble yourself, my dear. Mrs. Simpson reached into her bag, producing a ball of wool and some needles. I don't need it. Let her sleep. The light will only disturb her poor, weary eyes. Are you certain? Yes, I've been working in the dark for many years now. If she wakes, I have many passages from the Bible memorized, and so many passages from Scott, Poe, Byron, Austen, Blake. Yes, I've been doing this a good many years. I read to many of my charges to soothe them, and have so many volumes committed to memory now. A few paragraphs of Kant will put anyone to sleep. No, I don't need the light. Mrs. Brooks nodded, leaving the matches by the lamp, and excused herself. Mrs. Simpson adjusted her wool and needles and began working on her shawl, rocking slowly and humming a little hymn into the fading light. Her fingers were nimble, feeling the stitches which formed on her thick wooden needles and allowing the fabric to pool in her lap. Outside, the sun continued to set, flooding the room with darkness. After a time, Mr. Brooks came home from work. The healthy ate dinner, and Mrs. Simpson coaxed a little broth between the dry, cracked lips of Miss Black. The children were at last tucked into bed, and the house quieted. Mrs. Brooks looked in on her patient and the watcher, but was dismissed with a friendly nod, the wheezing breath of Delia Black assuring any within hearing distance that life still remained, at least for the time being. She and her husband crept up to bed, assured of at least one night's decent rest. The widow continued to rock and knit and hum as silence closed in around them, as though oblivious to all but the labored, sleeping breaths of her charge. Around 11:30, the timbre of the raspy breaths changed, and Mrs. Simpson stopped rocking, allowing her work to lay still in her lap. Delia coughed, struggling to breathe. Quick as a wink, the watcher was on her feet, helping her onto her side and patting her back as she coughed up blood and mucus. At last, the spasm stilled. Mrs. Simpson reached for a glass of water, holding it to Delia's lips and helping her to drink. Finally, she lay back on the pillows, sweat beading her brow. There now, it's all right. Delia sighed. It will be over soon. It will, Mrs. Simpson reassured her, patting her hand. The night is the worst. I know I won't see morning. We'll just have to wait and see. Mrs. Simpson poured out a spoonful of medicine from the bottle on the nightstand and helped her to swallow it. Soon she fell back into another fitful doze, her breathing more labored than before. The watcher sat back in her chair, retrieving her knitting from where it had fallen, but it remained still on her knee. Though she was not as hopeless as the young woman in her bed, she did agree with one thing. The next few hours, maybe less, would determine Delia Black's fate. The clock in the next room ticked on to midnight. Mrs. Simpson fancied she could hear it through the wall, even over the wheezing of her patient. She closed her eyes, listening hard. Though the night had been clear when she arrived, the wind had picked up and the windows began to rattle ever so slightly. The clock struck the hour. A cool breeze, like a soft exhale, caressed her cheek. Mrs. Simpson tensed, fist closing on her knitting. On the bed, Miss Black took in a strained breath, as though attempting to gasp but unable. Mrs. Simpson took up one of her needles, thick as one of her knobby fingers and sharp as a blade, tearing it from her work and plunging it down toward the young woman's chest. A scream like a tortured animal ripped through the night, but it didn't come from the woman in the bed. A creature swathed in black with glowing red eyes rolled off the bed, the wooden stake stuck fast below one shoulder. Hissing, it locked eyes on the watcher and lunged. Mrs. Simpson took up her second needle, determined not to let this one go. The creature, the vampire, could not remove the one protruding from its back, but it was little more than a paper cut to such an undead menace. It leaped over the bed, arms outstretched. Mrs. Simpson fell back onto the rocker, the chair nearly rolling over backwards. She tried to stab the creature with her remaining weapon, but it held her wrists, pinning her to the seat. Any moment the family would enter and witness the spectacle. The creature opened its mouth, displaying long fangs, the like of which could be found on no living man or beast. With each breath Mrs. Simpson exhaled, she felt it drawing out her life, just as it had been doing to poor Delia night after night. At last she twisted, the rocker tilted to one side, dumping them both on the floor with a crash, but putting Mrs. Simpson on top of her attacker. She wrenched her arm free and drove the pointed wooden stake deep into the creature's chest. It screamed again, vanishing into oily smoke and leaving her other needle behind on the floor. That was how Mr. and Mrs. Brooks found her, on all fours, panting on the floor. "My goodness, what's happened?" Mrs. Brooks demanded, as she and her husband helped the old woman to her feet and righted the chair. "I'm so sorry. Miss Black had a bad dream. I went to get her some water and my skirt caught on the rocker. I'm so sorry," Mrs. Simpson lied quickly. Mrs. Brooks ran to the lamp and lit it, holding it up to examine her sister. But Delia, face flushed pink with excitement, sat up in bed. "Is it gone?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse, but not strained, and didn't tremble. Mrs. Simpson sat at the edge of the bed, feeling her forehead for fever, checking her pulse, and listening to her breath. She smiled. "It's gone, dear. Your affliction is gone." Mrs. Simpson rose from her chair at dawn, reaching for her shawl and tucking her knitting back into her bag. Delia stirred, rolling over and waking from her first restful sleep in weeks. "Are you leaving so soon?" "My work is done, dear. And look, you did see morning after all." Delia turned to the window, smiling a little. "What was that? I could feel it every night, but I thought it was a nightmare. No one believed me." Tears welled in her eyes. "A vampire. But you must never tell anyone. They are quite rare and we don't want to cause a panic." "Then how did it get here?" "It's passed through families, like an illness. I believe you lost a brother recently. It was in the paper." Sitting up, Delia nodded. "Yes, he was very ill, and he probably caught it from a dear friend or another relative, but the affliction died with him now." From her bag, she pulled out a paper packet and handed it to her charge. "Sprinkle this on his grave to make sure it never happens again. You're safe now." "What kind of agency do you work for?" she asked, both startled and curious. Mrs. Simpson smiled and produced a black-bordered calling card. "We watchers take our duties very seriously. Why watch someone die when you can help them live?" A knitting needle seems a poor weapon against something like a vampire. Women with pistols make men nervous, and where would I put a sword? She tapped the side of her nose. "Besides, why do you think watchers are always old widows? We are always armed." Patting her bag with a smile, she turned and left. As she pulled on her bonnet on the front step, the shadows of Porter Street seemed to attach themselves to her hem, following her away from the house and making room for the sun. thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you come back soon for another spooky tale as we knit by candlelight. I post every other Wednesday with occasional bonus content in between, so subscribe to make sure you don't miss out. Until then, I hope you are safe and healthy with something soft and fluffy to cuddle with. Ciao.